Hi everyone, my name is Colin.
And my name is Carson.
In this short video, we will be talking about how the Canadian government and Canadians were reacting to Chinese immigrants and how they are changing their attitudes over time. In 1858, the first major wave of Chinese arrived in Canada. Thousands of young men crossed the ocean to escape poverty and starvation in China. They left behind wives, children, and other family members at great sacrifice, out of desperation to mine for rides. British Columbia paid little attention to the influx of Chinese. They worked as gold prospectors, then as laborers to dig ditches and build roads for a growing colony. Chinese were at the bottom of the social and economic ladder. Between 1878 and 1894, the government passed 26 laws to restrict the Chinese as much as possible. Racist laws, regulations, and policies against them, for example, Chinese laborers, could not be employed in British Columbia in 1878 to build public works projects like roads and bridges. Additionally, they were not permitted to work in underground mines. The discrimination against Chinese in virtually every sector of society cannot be easily dismissed as an historical accident, based purely on white Canadians' fear on non-white minority. The Chinese were tolerated as cheap workers in jobs that were not sought by white workers, but as soon they returned into better and higher-paying jobs, they quickly became the target of racial exclusion. The Chinese head tax is linked to the history of head taxes in Canada with regard to Chinese immigration. The Chinese Immigration Act of 1885 imposed the first head tax, which charged Chinese immigrants entering Canada a $50 fee. Later in 1900, this sum was raised to $100. The Chinese Immigration Act of 1923, the second head tax. For almost 24 years, Chinese immigration to Canada was essentially stopped by this legislation. Families were split up for a long period of time, and very few Chinese people were permitted in at this time.
By narrowly defining the acceptable categories of Chinese immigrants, the Chinese Immigration Act of 1923 effectively prohibited all Chinese immigrants to Canada. While the entry duty requirement was removed, Chinese immigrants were only permitted if they were diplomats or government representatives, children born in Canada who had left for educational or other reasons, or students enrolled in university or college. It is estimated that only 15 Chinese immigrants entered Canada between 1923 and 1946. Changing attitudes starting in 1960, the Chinese Adjustment Program allowed paper sons and daughters to apply for legal status. More significantly, Canada's immigration policy was overhauled in 1967. For the first time since 1885, the Chinese applied for entry on equal footing with other immigrants. Waves of Chinese newcomers arrived, first from Hong Kong, then from Vietnam, Taiwan, and China, bringing with them a diversity of skills, languages, and traditions. Eventually, the trajectory of the relationship between the Canadian government, Canadians, and Chinese immigrants has shifted from one of discriminatory policies to one of efforts toward inclusivity and diversity. The changing attitude reflects broader societal changes, demonstrating a commitment to making the country efforts more tolerant and accepting. Nonetheless, ongoing efforts are required to address remaining challenges and ensure that Canada remains a welcoming and inclusive home for people all around the world.